Okay, let's jump in. For this deep dive, we're looking at the life of Johann Sebastian Bach, and specifically his early career. And eh, well, it's a lot more dramatic than you might think from the portraits.
It really is. The common image is this, solemn, powdered wig genius. But the reality is a story of constant movement, of conflict.
And that's what we want to trace, how he went from this orphaned kid in a small town to, the celebrated Thomaskantor in Leipzig.
Exactly. And you can't understand his music without understanding the world that made him. This very specific cultural and political crucible in central Germany, Thuringia, and Saxony.
The green heart of Germany. It wasn't one big country, but this patchwork of tiny little principalities.
Little courts like Weimar and Cöthen. And for them, culture was everything. They competed with each other through their music.
So having a prestigious Kapelle, a band of musicians, was a huge status symbol.
A massive one. And for an ambitious young guy like Bach, these courts were the fast track.
Yeah.
A much better career path than, say, a local church job, which could be really bogged down in tradition.
So that's our mission, really,
Yeah.
to figure out how this deeply conservative environment produced a man whose early years were just full of rebellion and conflict.
Only for him to later create music of almost perfect mathematical order. It's a fascinating contradiction.
And the foundation for all of this is Lutheranism, right?
You cannot overstate its importance. Martin Luther himself saw music as a gift from God, second only to theology. So music was vital, but it was a specific kind of music.
Very traditional.
Very. Deeply skeptical of flashy foreign styles like Italian opera that were popular elsewhere. This was the world that shaped Bach.
A world he entered with a lot of hardship. He was an orphan in Eisenach by 1695. He was only 10.
And he goes to live with his older brother, Johann Christoph, who had studied with the famous Pachelbel.
Ah, the plot thickens.
It does, because Christoph had this incredible library of keyboard music, all the greats, Pachelbel, Froberger, Kerl, and young Sebastian was desperate to get his hands on it.
And this is where we get that amazing anecdote, the one that just says so much about his drive.
It's perfect. Christoph forbids him from using the book, so Sebastian has to resort to what the official family obituary calls innocent deceit.
Which I love. So the book is locked away in a cupboard.
Locked in a cupboard with a lattice door. So at night, when everyone's asleep, 10-year-old Sebastian reaches his small hands through the gaps.
No way.
Oh yeah, he rolls up the manuscript, pulls it out, and then, because he can't risk lighting a candle, he copies the entire thing, page by page.
By what? Moonlight?
By the light of the moon. For 6 months.
That is just, the
Yeah.
level of obsession is unbelievable. What happens when Christoph finds out?
Christoph finds the copy and just confiscates it.
Harsh.
Very. But it shows you that this drive for musical knowledge, this hunger to possess and systematize, it was there from the very beginning.
And it clearly paid off. By 1700, he's good enough to get a choir spot in Lüneburg. That's a big move for him.
A huge move. It gets him out of his little Thuringian bubble.
Yeah.
In Lüneburg, he gets access to a fantastic music library, and he probably visits the nearby court at Celle.
And Celle was very French-influenced, right?
Exactly. So for the first time, he's really hearing composers like Couperin and Grini. He's absorbing all these different styles, even if he's still grounded in that German tradition.
Word must have gotten around about his talent because by 1703, he's briefly in Weimar. The job title is Hofmusicus, a court musician, but almost immediately people are calling him the court organist.
His keyboard skill was just undeniable, which leads him directly to his first major post in Arnstadt later that year. He's only 18.
18 years old, and he's invited to test a brand new organ, and they just offer him the job on the spot.
His performance was apparently that good. It sounds like a dream job.
It sounds like it, but his time in Arnstadt was, let's just say it was rocky, full of conflict.
This is where we see his temper. The most famous story is the sword fight.
A sword fight in the town marketplace.
In 1705, yes.
Yeah.
With a bassoonist named Johann Heinrich Geiersbach. Bach apparently insulted him, called him a zippelfagotist.
And what on earth does that mean?
It's a fantastic insult. It basically means a greenhorn or novice bassoonist. She's pulling rank. Bach was the 20-year-old professional, and he was treating this 23-year-old student musician like he was nothing.
And Geiersbach didn't take it well.
He did not. Things escalated, and Bach actually drew his sword to defend himself.
Wow. Okay. So he's passionate about his musical status, but the conflicts weren't just personal, they were professional too. Tell us about the Buxtehude trip.
Right. This is everything about his priorities. He asks for 4 weeks of leave to go visit the great organist Dietrich Buxtehude in Lübeck.
Which was not a shore walk.
It was a 260-mile journey. On foot, most likely. But here's the thing. He doesn't come back in 4 weeks.
How long was he gone?
4 months.
4 months. He just ghosted his employer for a quarter of a year. What was so important?
Buxtehude represented a whole other world of music. More dramatic, more virtuosic than anything he'd get in conservative Thuringia.
Yeah.
He was essentially risking his job to get a musical education you couldn't find at home.
He was outgrowing his environment.
And that led directly to his final reprimand in Arnstadt. This time, about the music itself. He was formally accused of confusing the congregation by putting sundry curious embellishments and many strange notes into the hymns.
So he comes back from seeing Buxtehude all fired up with these new ideas.
And he tries to use them in church, and the congregation just hates it. They want their simple hymns, not his complex, flashy variations. He was just too advanced for them.
And this frustration continues in his next job in Mühlhausen. He gets married there to Maria Barbara, but he's still running into the same problems.
Yes, he complained of vexation and hindrance. It was opposition from the more pietist-leaning church members who just didn't want elaborate, expensive church music.
It seems like the church just kept holding him back, so it makes total sense that he'd run back to the courts.
Which is exactly what he did. In 1708, he goes back to Weimar, this time as the official court organist, and eventually he's promoted to concertmeister.
A concertmaster.
Yeah.
So his main job is now composing.
It is. The Duke, while a bit of a Puritan, really supported the court's music. Bach's contract initially required 1 new cantata per month.
And he quickly ramped that up, right?
By the end of his time there, he was churning out a new cantata every single week. It was an incredible compositional workout.
And before he leaves Weimar, he has this legendary public victory, the Dresden Duel.
Ah, yes, the duel. It was high drama. He was set up to challenge this famous French keyboard star, Louis Marchand.
So a musical showdown.
A public showdown. The story goes that Marchand secretly listened to Bach warming up the day before and realized he was completely outmatched. So when the time came for the duel, Marchand was nowhere to be found. He had fled the city.
He ran away.
He did. It was this ignominious retreat, as the sources say. And it cemented Bach's reputation across Germany as the undisputed king of the keyboard.
What a story. So after that, he makes another big move to Cöthen as Kapellmeister for Prince Leopold.
And this was a huge step up. It was his best-paying job yet. But more importantly, the court was Calvinist.
Which meant what, musically?
It meant very little demand for elaborate church music. The focus was almost entirely on instrumental music. For Bach, after years of fighting with church councils, this was creative freedom.
This was his laboratory.
Precisely. You can see it in what he produces there. Masterpieces. The Brandenburg concertos, the inventions, and the first book of the Well-Tempered Clavier.
So all that energy he was putting into strange notes in the hymns?
He could now channel into perfecting instrumental forms. He had this desire, as one source puts it, to bring a particular genre to completion and then to turn from it. He was creating encyclopedias of music.
But his time in Cöthen was also marked by a terrible tragedy.
A devastating one.
Yeah.
In 1720, he comes back from a trip with the prince to find that his wife, Maria Barbara, had not only died but had already been buried.
He didn't even know she was sick.
He had no idea, and yet even in that grief, his art sustained him. Shortly after, he visited Hamburg and played for the legendary old organist J.A. Reinken.
And he improvised for him.
For over 2 hours. At the end, Reinken famously said to him, "I thought such art was dead, but I see it still lives in you." It's this incredible moment of validation from the old guard.
So after Cöthen in 1723, he makes the move he's most famous for, to Leipzig.
To the cantor position at the St. Thomas School. It's a complex job, not just for one church, but overseeing the music for the whole city.
And this is where that infamous quote comes from, right? The councilman who said since they couldn't get the best candidates, they'd have to settle for a mediocre one.
Yes, Councillor Platz's comment. But it's almost always misunderstood. He wasn't calling Bach's music mediocre.
So what was the problem?
The problem was that the cantor was also supposed to teach Latin. And the top candidates, like Telemann and Bach, were brilliant musicians who, quite reasonably, had no interest in teaching grammar to schoolboys.
So the council was upset they had to hire a specialist, not an all-rounder. It was a bureaucratic complaint.
Exactly. It had nothing to do with his musical ability.
And his musical output there was just staggering. In those first few years, he was writing a new church cantata pretty much every week.
On top of the huge works like the St. John and St. Matthew Passions and the Magnificat, The pace is just mind-boggling.
But the institutional support wasn't there. He wrote that famous memorandum to the town council in 1730.
He did. He complained of constant vexation, envy, and harassment. He lays out all the problems.
What was the main issue?
The
Resources.
severe lack of resources.
Yeah.
He had only 8 professional instrumentalists on staff for all of the city's churches. 8. He had to fill out the rest of the orchestra with university students. He was constantly fighting for the basics.
And on top of fighting with the council, the musical tastes were changing around him.
Yes, that leads to the public attack in 1737 from Johann Sebastian. Sebastian represented the new, trendy gallant style, which was all about simple, elegant melodies.
Not Bach's thing.
Not at all. Sebastian basically accused Bach of being old-fashioned. He said Bach's music was too complex, too dense with counterpoint. He famously said Bach wrote for singers as if they were keyboard instruments.
That's a brutal criticism.
It is. So faced with all this, the bureaucracy, the lack of resources, the critical attacks, Bach seems to turn inward. He focuses on publishing these huge, systematic collections of his work.
And he often used parody, right? Reusing his own older music.
Constantly. It was a practical way to preserve his best ideas. Large chunks of the B minor Mass, for example, are brilliant reworkings of earlier cantata movements. He was building his own legacy.
Which brings us to his final great collection, the Klavierübung series, which ends with the Goldberg variations.
The perfect summary of his life's work, really. It's pure systematic genius applied to instrumental music, his refuge from all the church politics.
He takes one simple theme.
A simple bass line, really, and builds this colossal structure of 30 variations on top of it.
And the structure itself is the key.
It's all about the canons. Every third variation is a canon, with the interval between the voices increasing each time, a canon at the unison, then the second to the third, all the way up. 9 canons in total. It's pure mathematical and artistic logic.
When you look back, you see this incredible line connecting the defiant kid copying music by moonlight to the old master organizing these perfect canons.
It's the same intensity, the same drive for completeness.
The young man who drew a sword over a musical insult is the same man who would later build these impregnable fortresses of counterpoint.
Absolutely. The conservative Lutheran world gave him the raw material, the forms. But it was the constant friction, the constant pushback that forced him to innovate and systematize his own genius. That's what made him Bach.
The system he built is just awe-inspiring. So think about this. The Goldberg variations have those 9 canons all systematically arranged.
Ah.
And we know that in the German musical alphabet, the letters of Bach's name, B-A-C-H, add up to the number 14. He was obsessed with this stuff.
He was the 14th member to join his musical society. The number pops up everywhere.
So here's something to think about. Given that deep fascination with numerology and the perfect systems he built in his published works, what other hidden mathematical codes might he have deliberately woven into the fabric of his masterpieces from that late Leipzig period? Something for you to mull over.